Saturday, August 31st, 2002, and we're visiting with Margaret's father, John Miller, and he is going to talk about some of the early years of his family, starting when his parents got married in 1923. Go ahead.
Okay, in 1923, Mom's brother and Dad's sister got married in February. And Mom and Dad were the first time they were put together at this wedding. And then Dad asked her sometime right soon after this whether she would marry him. Then in May the 6th, 1923, they got married. And they lived, I guess that was May 3rd, I'm not sure exactly. But then they got married and they lived in the home place. Dad was farming this before he got married. And in the meantime, they got married and lived there for I don't know just how long, but Jake and Mary had moved over to the farm where I was born and raised.
What is the home place? Is that in LaGrange County?
Yes, it's in LaGrange County. The home place was where John D. Miller lived in a lane, and it's a mile east. A mile east of the south end of the Emma Lake is where John D. lived in a lane. The schoolhouse where I went to school was Werninger, and he gave the land on the corner of that corner to build the schoolhouse on. Today the schoolhouse is gone and the land is back on the farm. If you go east from this corner to the first farm on the left-hand side is where my mom's folks lived. They were neighbors. And then they were farming at home, and Jake and Mary had moved over to where I was born and raised all of my life with my folks. It was the only place that I ever lived with my folks. And that was a mile south and east, a quarter of a mile on the south side of the road is where that was. Well, something's happened, I don't know really what, but anyway, they thought that it probably wouldn't work out with Dad and Mom at home, so they decided to change. Jake and Mary moved back home with the folks. Mom and Dad moved over there where I was born and raised. And then when they made the move, Jake's and whoever was involved offered them to trade the mint for the wheat. Dad had wheat out and Jake and Mary had mint out, and they said that they would trade even up. So they did. Well, then they moved over there, and then in January 1925, the 19th, I was born there. And that's where I was the rest of my life with my folks. I left before they moved to Goshen. I worked out for Roy Miller's, and I got married to them before they were moved to Goshen in the meantime. Now, to go back to this point of this was in 1925. And the next thing that I can really recall and remember is in 1930, we built a new house, and the Depression set in 1929. But the mint went way high. The mint went, Dad got $25 a pound. I think it went up as high as $30 a pound that time. But Dad got $25 a pound for his mint that he sold. which give them a real boost, especially with the Depression on. We really didn't even recognize the Depression, really, because I never remembered any hard times of anything. One thing that I'd always remembered was when Dad went to town to get groceries, he usually come home with some kind of candy, mostly chocolate drops. And we were always looking forward to these.
That's with the cream in the middle?
Cream in the middle
Yeah.
is right.
Okay.
Very good. I still like them. I still eat them when I get a chance. So they build a new house. My grandpa and my mom's dad come over to help us build the house. And in the meantime, Mom, from her folks, got $6,000 for the farm, which was half of the farm. That's what it cost them. My dad got $1,350 plus a cow from his folks, and then they had this break in the mint. So in 1930 then, we were building a new house. I still remember that very vividly. I did a few things that time. I made some marks in the toilet outside. We had outside toilets. I got a little bit scolded for it. I made a little diamond, which I shouldn't have, but I did. And then the plasterers were there plastering the stairway, and I asked them, how's come the roosters crow all the time? And they were laughing about that. That's some of the things that I remember as far as the building concerned. Grandpa helped build. We built the new house, and it was a very nice house. I remember Grandpa going with me back to get the cows, half a mile back. And I asked him where the cows find the calves. He said along the ditch bank, which they did there. They were there.
That was your mom's dad,
My mom's
your
dad,
grandfather.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't blame him. I don't have anything against him over that. He did a good job. And then back there in the ditch, along the ditch, my dad found a spring, and he put a 50-pound nail keg down into the spring, and the water ran over the top of it. That was some real fresh, clear, cold water coming out there that we used to drink out of when we were back there working. This was new ground, broken up, never farmed before. And this is where this was at, in the back of the farm. We had 80 acres. So we go from there after the new house was built and everything. And then I was usually told to clean the house. In other words, I swept the room, and we were children like anybody else's. And we cleaned the house in the morning. I remember my dad and Mom bought a brand new rug, and it was a black one, and all the dirt showed on this rug. But we got along all right. I would cook the breakfast the best I could, which we always had oatmeal. Mom and Dad would go out and milk the cows and come in. Later years, I helped with the separating. Dad had made a wash house. We had one of these hit and miss tractors. I still like to have one just to play with it. You start it and it would pump the water for the tank. We had a big tank for water supply in the basement, so we had running water and toilet. We also had a cream separator that run from this shaft and everything, you know, and I'd sit there and I'd usually drink about 2 pints of skimmed milk while watching this. And we separated and we sold the cream. Right side of this was a thing built for kettles. The one kettle was for washing, and the other kettle was there extra, and we used it for apple butter and stuff. And I would still remember that very good. And the room next to it, just west, was our wood house. Everything was full of wood in there. And in between the two, we went down the basement. You went from one basement to the other. So it was a very, very unique situation as far as a home. I still remember everything very vividly, very clearly on all these things that was there. I was about 8 years old, and I have to say this, that I wasn't always the best boy. We had a certain kind of soap, and I didn't like it, and I used a word that I shouldn't have used, and my dad gave me a whipping with a strap. That's the last whipping that I can remember I ever had, 8 years old. And I don't remember ever having any before. But he was a man of few words, good-hearted. But when he said something, you knew you were supposed to listen. So from there, as I was, I think, 7 years old, I started with the horses working in the field. East of the buildings, the first thing that I remember happened was I dropped the line and it got under the color packer and the horses stopped. So Dad had to come and help me on that. Then I was either 8 or 9 years old, something like that. I went back, and we used to raise wheat, and in the wheat we sowed clover. And then the wheat stubbles were high. So in the spring, after it was warm enough and dry enough, you would color pack these wheat stubbles down, and so that they wouldn't get into the hay when you mowed the hay. So when I did that, my dad told me, he was at home trimming the trees in the orchard. He told me, he says, now when you get done, you can tie the horses to the gate and come home and I'll go back and get it. Well, I thought I was a pretty big boy. So I decided, well, I can open the gate and I can get on there and drive the horses home. And as I did this, I opened the gate, and then as I walked back, I decided, well, if I go around the back, they may start before I get up there. So I decided I'll sneak up in front and grab the lines and get up before they start going. Well, I didn't make it. They laid me down and the color packer went over me. After the color packer went over me, they went to the post and they stopped because they couldn't go on because the post stopped. I didn't have no wild horses. But I got up, started walking home. I guess I was crying. Started walking home and Dad came running and hollered and said, go back, watch the horses. So I turned around to go back to watch the horses. Before I got there, he went around me. Said, you can go home. So I went home, walked home. And the next thing I can remember is the doctor was there. And in my ear, the left ear was slid off a bunch of it, and they tied it on. The next time he come out to dress it, he jerked this dressing off in a real quick way. And that hurt worse than anything else because he took the hide off the bottom of my skin, my neck, because he pulled this all off at once. I was laying there in the living room in a little crib. Well, I got over that.
How long were you in bed with that?
I wasn't in bed.
Oh, okay, so you didn't have a concussion or anything?
No. The next morning I got up and I couldn't see out of the left side of my eye. Left eye I couldn't see anything, the right eye just a little bit. It was all swollen. My grandpa, when he heard it, he says, "Is he still living?" I said, "Yes." And sorry to say, 3 boys the Cullipacker hit that day. So I wasn't the only one. Well, I guess from there,
Where did you go to school?
I went to
And the
Werninger
corner?
School. I never had to walk. Irie Donaldson was the driver, and we could see him coming. And he was a very good driver. I never had to walk to school.
Was it on a school bus?
School
Yeah.
bus. Every year I went to school. And we had a good school. Now my folks were rather strict in some areas. They wouldn't let me go to another school to play baseball or softball. They wouldn't let me go play our in B spellings and arithmetic tests,
For competition?
competition. When I was in the 5th grade, we would have competition in our own school just for practice sake. And the teacher would read it so fast, and some of them said, "Not so fast." And he says, "I have to. If I don't, there's some here that'll add it up before I get done." And I know who he was talking about.
He's talking about you?
Yes. Because arithmetic, I was very fast.
Okay.
Spelling, I wasn't. Spelling, I was no good, but arithmetic, I was. So, Werninger, Stanley Mishler, went to Werninger School, and Dan Yoder, that was Mena Yoder's Dan, and I were the only 2 boys that went to school in Werninger School in the same grade every year I went. So he could go over there, but I couldn't. When he come back, he told me, he says, "Now, if you can beat Stanley in the first problem, you got it. So he can't do anything after that." So I decided, okay, well, I beat him. So I beat him all the way through there then. Then softball. I and John Beachy were in the 5th grade, and it was us 2 competition, and sometimes we were both on, sometimes we weren't, but I was good in playing ball. There's one thing that I really enjoyed in school. I had skates, and my wife's sister Mandy just called me this week, wrote me a letter. Yes, she called. She said, "I still remember them school days." She said, "You were so nice to the little children that you would come pick them up and just skate around with them." And she still remembers that, which I used to do, I know.
And Mandy went to the same school you did?
Mandy went to the same school. Mandy told my wife she knows me better than she does. So I don't know whether she does or not, but I think my wife knows me pretty well now too. So on the first, this was after a while. Now I have to go back a little bit. I skipped something. My first year in school, I went to school and I brought home peanuts, and Eli and Sarah and Wyman were born. And Wyman was 11 months, 23 days, 1 year, 11 months and 23 days old. so that I could color and I didn't have to watch the horses, which was a unique outfit at that time. And they told us to go back and stay back until they come and got us, because Freeman was born that day. And so that was that situation. And Viola was born March the 2nd, 1938. Then Alice was born March the 15th, 1940, and she died March 16th, 1940. Then Omer was born March 21st, 1941, and Truman was born April 16th, 1945. We got married in February 13th in 1945, and we did not know Mom was pregnant at that time.
A few months later, you had a brother.
A few months later, I had a brother.
Why did Alice die?
Premature, I think,
Premature.
something, yeah. I don't know, she just lived. It was from birth.
Okay.
Something, I really don't know.
Okay.
That time they didn't have too much things to work with, you know.
Right. How about childhood diseases? Did you or your brothers and sisters have any childhood diseases other than like mumps and measles?
I can't remember us. It seems to me that we had the whooping cough once, but I can't really remember of anything special diseases that we had as far as that was concerned.
Okay.
Just ordinary diseases.
Just a regular childhood?
Yeah, childhood diseases.
Uh-huh.
Whenever we got sick, Mom would always put us wax, put salve on us, and we used tea and everything else.
More herbal doctor.
Yeah, more herbal. That's what they. I can still remember my mom's mother. This goes back now a long ways. When she would walk through the garden, Sundays when we were there, or through the week, in the evenings, and she would walk through the garden, and me as a little kid following around. I can still remember her going through the garden saying, "This is good for this, and this is good for this, and this is good for this." All the way around the garden, she had teas and stuff that she knew what it was good for. That was my mom's mom.
Okay.
Then she died. I remember yet very vividly when she died. You could hear her breathing outside the house. I remember that very well yet. Then my mom's dad got married the second time, and then the third time. And at that time we were not so close anymore to him, because we moved away and other things that happened. But that's basically what was going on as far as that is concerned. Now, I don't know what to share, except there is some things that I want to share, but I don't believe we have the time on this tape to come with that, and we'll hit another tape sometime.
Okay.
And if you got any questions right now, that's something that you want to ask me that I went over.
What was your primary means of communication? Did you use horse and buggy or car or bikes, or how did you get around?
Well, at the time of this age where I'm talking about lately now, we had a car. But at the time when, up until the time that...
How old were you when your dad got a car?
8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
Is when my dad got a car. They kicked my dad out of church, but I would like to go in detail a little more on that a little later, although I guess I can if we have time. I'll
We only have 5 minutes now, so.
I can start with it. What happened was the church was divided, and the bishop and my mom's folks and my dad's folks both lived on the north side of the road. And they divided the church, and we were supposed to go on the south side of the church. Well, my folks were near to the parents, both of them. They thought a lot of the minister at that time. There was absolutely no problems. And so they just, instead of making a fuss, they just went across the road and went to the old church. Well, then trouble started, where some of the relations didn't like it, and the church people, some of them wanted them to go where they were supposed to go, so they went. Dad was not kicked out of the church by the bishop. He was kicked out of the church by one of the other ministers. I will not name him, but I know which one it was. So this was something that he kind of held on to too.
He was kicked out because he did buy a car.
No,
No.
he was kicked out because he didn't go where they wanted him to go.
Oh, okay.
That's what shut it off, will you please?
Okay.
Anyway, Bean's dad was kicked out of church, and Mom wasn't. Brother Eli always kind of kidded me about it, that I had to go with Mom to church to take care of the horse for her, and he didn't have to go. So this is kind of comical, I guess, in a way, but in another way, I was the oldest, and it was my responsibility, and I tried to do what I was told to do and felt needed to do. So I went with Mom to church, took care of the horse, and then a little bit later, things changed quite a bit. And I think I will leave it at this point, at this time. And I'll not start into when we got the car.
Okay.
Till the next time.
Okay.
So
Can I ask about something I'd asked about earlier, the storms, that one hailstorm you had where there was quite a bit of
yeah.
hail? What can you say about that time?
Bill asked me about the hailstorm, any storms that I remembered. We used to have some thunderstorms that, we were scared of sometime. And there was one other storm, if I can get this on here.
Sure.
Before World War II, there was an evening that the sky was lit up. It looked like fire in waves in an ocean all over our place. I remember that very, very well. They even said a lot of people, including our ministers, went down the basement and hit themselves because they were scared of it. And this was a very, very different. I never seen it since. I never seen it before. It was similar a little bit to Northern Lights, but it come out all over the sky. Very, very plain. We had a hailstorm. I remember we were in the barn milking. The hail was so deep we rigged